They're live.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name's Ashleigh Brown, and I am the camp coordinator at Ecosystem Restoration Camps. And we're here today with some of the teachers from our Ecosystem Restoration Design online course, which we have been creating with Gaia Education. And the course is due to launch in the next 10 days. The classroom opens on the 15th of May, and the first module starts on May the 18th. So we thought it would be a good time to get the course teachers together so that you can ask us any questions that we have about any questions that you have about the course. So that's what we're here for today. And we're joined by Daniel from San Miguel de Allende in Mexico and his project Navi Village, which is part of the Urban Ecosystems module. We're here with Daan, who is from IVN in the Netherlands, and he focuses on creating tiny forests in urban areas. We're here with Rhamis, who is teaching about permaculture in arid areas in Jordan. Alan, who focuses on restoration of temperate forests in Scotland. And Oliver, who is our restoration coordinator, and he will be working with the students on creating restoration plans for Module 5. So thank you all for being here. We'll start with a round of introductions, and then we'll answer three main questions, which are, why is this course needed now? What can people learn from it? So what can students that take the course learn from it? And what will you as a student be able to do once you've taken the course? And then we'll have about half an hour left at the end for any questions that you have for us. So without further ado, we're going to do a round of intros. Should we start with Daniel?
Yeah, of course. Hello, my name is Daniel Validiviezo. I'm from Mexico, originally from Mexico City, and I grew up in an oak forest near the city. And so I was always very connected to the woods and the relationship with the environment. Also close with some indigenous tribes and people here in the region. So I've been learning their ways and their connection to in that way. I've been dedicating my studies and work towards finding solutions so that human development can be more in harmony with nature without destroying it really. And I have a background in sustainable design. I've worked in energy saving companies, designing sustainable lighting for big buildings in the whole continent. And I also have worked in biomimicry, specifically focused on architecture. So to find ways how to create buildings that are in harmony with the natural world. So I'm a co-founder of Navi Village, which is a restorative village here in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. And what we're trying to do here is to create a model that buildings help us restore our ecosystems, so that every resource that we use in the house is treated and then is given back to the earth, so that we can give enough tools to people so that they know that every habit that they do in their normal life can have a benefit, can be productive towards restoration, like keeping humidity, giving nutrients back, such as compost or dry toilets or these things. And also to be more aware of our consumption of that same water, no? Utilizing efficient technology such as showers and nozzles so that we take care more of our resources like water and energy. Um, the mission of our company is to create spaces to nurture future generations and to address and to give a certain design that everyone can have, so that we can have spaces that nurture us and improve our health and our relationship with the ecosystems.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I have had the pleasure to stay in Daniel's home that he lives in now, which he also designed and built himself, and it is so, so beautiful. So anyone who gets to live in one of your houses is in for a real treat. Thanks very much. Okay, now let's go to Daan.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I am Daan. I live in the Netherlands. And like Daniel, I grew up near a forest. I grew up in a small village called Glimmen, and I think I was about 300 meters away from the forest. So I spent most of my childhood there. In 2011, I started working at IVN Nature Education. And I started working in the bigger cities like Amsterdam, The Hague, Rotterdam. And I found out that thousands of kids have never even been to nature. And I started interviewing kids and discovered that they don't even know we have forests in the Netherlands. They believe that's something that's abroad. So this really worried me, and I started working on projects like green schoolyards, teaching teachers to take their classes outdoors, and really fostering the connection between kids and nature in heavily urbanized areas. And it was, I think, about 4 or 5 years ago, I ran into a TED talk by Shubhendu Sharma, and he showed me how to convert a parking lot into a dense biodiverse forest within 1 or 2 years. And I was just amazed. I fell in love with this. Sorry about that. I fell in love with this idea of creating these native small woodlands the size of a tennis court. For the past 3 or 4 years, we've been working on that. We created about 80 tiny forests in the Netherlands. The following 2 years, we will plant 120 more. So yeah, it's been really exciting working with actually creating nature and joining all these people who are doing ecosystem restoration. So it's been a very hopeful time because science shows that nature can recover real quickly. Yeah, so basically those are the projects. I'm basically only working on tiny forests, and I'm right now advising people in England and Belgium to start a program that's getting ready today. That's me. So hopefully I'll see you, I think, in July.
I'm muted. The idea of being able to create a tiny forest in a city using working with people who have so little access to the living world is a really effective way of speeding up both ecosystem restoration and the knowledge and love of nature. So really glad to have you on the course and to have you here today. Rhamis, can you go next?
Sure. Greetings, everyone. My name's Rhamis Kent. I've been working as a consultant, trainer, teacher, mostly dealing with permaculture design. I trained with Jeff Lawton back in 2009 in Australia, and I interned with him. And I think what was interesting about my time with him was, he has something of a similar background as myself. He actually has a background in mechanics. I have a degree in mechanical engineering. And I think there are many aspects of the way that he teaches and frames permaculture that jived really well with, with my time studying mechanical engineering in the course of getting my degree. So I was able to apply, some of my, my previous work in that field with basically doing sort of regenerative design, whole systems design, agroecological design, and applying that specifically to working mostly in arid and semi-arid climates. And again, that was mostly through my contact with Jeff and his work in Jordan. So I've had an opportunity to, to work closely with the Lawtons. I became a co-director of the Permaculture Research Institute of Australia, and also of the US, along with Dan Halsey, for the past several years. I've also been working as a supervisory board member with the Ecosystem Restoration Camps Foundation, in addition to a number of other efforts. And I've taught courses and done consultancy work in the Middle East, North Africa region, the Mediterranean, sort of Southern Europe, and a number of other really interesting settings. And hopefully, what you'll get from the course that I'm teaching, specifically applying what it is that I do in the type of context that it's applied within is, the problem of land degradation and desertification is a very serious one in many parts of the world, and we see how this has pretty severe impacts as it concerns food and water security, or insecurity, I should say, internally displaced peoples, refugee populations, armed conflict, anything and everything related to human security, in addition to concerns tied to ecology and the environment. So it's just seeing how we can take these ideas, these regenerative ideas, and have them address not only environmental and ecological concerns, but ultimately concerns about the stability of our societies and in our communities.
Yeah. So having you on the course is really fantastic, because of your work in super dry, arid places, and seeing as desertification is such a rapidly growing and spreading phenomena, people knowing about how to restore arid land is something that's going to be really important, not just now, but in the future. So it's great to have you with us too, Rhamis. Alan, would you like to say a bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Ashleigh, and hi to everybody out there. Thanks for your interest in this course in ecosystem restoration. My name is Alan Watson Featherstone. I live in the north of Scotland at Findhorn, which is an international community and an eco-village. And about 40 years ago, I became aware of the sad state of Scotland's landscape. I grew up in the country thinking that the bare green hills and vast treeless expanses of Scotland that are so famous were natural. And having traveled to other parts of the world and seen healthy ecosystems, I discovered that this was a ruined former forest landscape that we had here in Scotland, and that the tiny 1% of the forest that was remaining, the Caledonian forest, in scattered isolated fragments, was dying of old age. The remnants consisted solely of old trees, which still produced good seed, but the seeds were getting eaten, the seedlings were getting eaten by deer and sheep, and it was the end of the line, what I call the geriatric forest. So I was inspired to do something. I felt the forest was calling out for help. So in 1986, I founded a project to restore it, which has become known as Trees for Life, conservation charity, which has to date planted something like 2 million trees, helped regenerate hundreds of thousands naturally, owns 10,000 acres of land, and has enabled thousands of volunteers to take part in helping to bring the landscape back to life. So I've got over 30 years of experience of practical skills and knowledge of how to help an ecosystem recover. And I've visited other restoration projects around the world as well, to exchange ideas, learn what they're doing. And in 1999, I founded something called the Restore the Earth Project, which is very ambitious. The idea being that the 21st century would become the century of restoring the earth, in which all humanity would come together behind a shared task. We've never had a goal that unites all countries and peoples before, but healing our wounded and broken planet and its depleted ecosystems surely has to be the thing that will bring people together. And it's what we all have in common. So I'm really excited about this course because it's a contribution towards helping many more people engage in that. And I'm looking forward to sharing my knowledge and expertise and hopefully providing inspiration for many people to engage in this work for the years and decades ahead.
Beautifully said, Alan, thank you. And last but not least, Oliver. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Marvelous. All right. Hey, everybody. And thanks for having me on here. My name is Oliver Goshey. I am a designer and a consultant for regenerative projects. And I also work as the restoration coordinator for ecosystem restoration camps. I am the founder and director of Abundant Edge and also host the Abundant Edge podcast, where I interview and highlight the work of other incredible workers in this field of ecosystem restoration. And I founded that company back in 2014 when I first started taking building contracts through natural building. And I have quite a diverse background. I didn't get into this quite directly as some others did. I started out working in conservation and doing sort of trail building crews and restoration crews in national parks around the United States. And myself and my family, we've been moving around since I was a kid. So I've been exposed to a lot of cultures in a lot of different areas of the world. And some of my motivation in this is just seeing how it's affected so many diverse landscapes and the impact that it's had on cultures, and the way that this is starting to move towards a pattern of degradation that I wanted to be a part of the solution towards. And since then, I've helped to design and build natural buildings and ecological landscape projects in places like the Philippines, Senegal, the United States, and Guatemala, where I was before relocating. I'm now based in Spain. And I'm very passionate about helping people and communities to build resilient lives which regenerate our damaged ecosystems. I think that this course right now is extremely important and goes along well with the UN's initiatives to raise awareness around a decade of ecosystem regeneration. And all of the different things that you'll be able to learn through this are going to give you the tools, the knowledge, and really the examples to have the confidence to start making real change and positive impact on whatever piece of land that you might have access to, with whatever resources you're currently working with. Even if you don't think that you're ready or that you have what you need to get started, you'll, by the end of this, definitely have a broader idea of what you can do even with limited resources and even lack of experience, because of the support that these fantastic instructors are going to be able to kind of hold your hand through.
Great. Fantastic. Okay, so let's move on to the next stage of the Q&A, where we're going to talk about the question of, why is this course needed now? What is it about the world in May 2020 that necessitates people to learn what they will learn on this course? And maybe we can just raise our hands if we want to say something. Is there anyone that wants to start us off with an answer? Alan.
Yeah, thanks. For me, we're really at a critical time for a whole number of reasons, with not just the coronavirus outbreak and the threat of climate change, but the sixth mass extinction, the depletion of ecosystems everywhere, and the trend that has been going on most noticeably for 200 or 300 years, but actually for several thousand years, has now reached critical point. And that trend is humans using up ecosystems, depleting their resources, and the cultures going into decline or moving on elsewhere. And if you look at where all the cultures, the early cultures began in the world, the Middle East, Persia, Egypt, and so forth, those areas are all deserts now. And civilizations don't begin in deserts, they're what we leave behind. And of course, we're depleting the last untouched ecosystems on the planet. So we've got to learn as a species on Earth to do something that we've never done before, which is actually to stop destroying ecosystems and help them to recover. And the Earth has a natural ability, a natural facility to repair after damage. So when an asteroid hits, like it did 66 million years ago, or a volcano erupts, nature will recover. It's like a human body with a healing ability, but we interfere with that. So what we've got to learn to do is stop interfering with it and assist it where possible and accelerate that process. And no human culture has ever attempted that before on any significant scale. That is the challenge that lies ahead of us. And it's a much bigger challenge than dealing with COVID-19 or all the things that dominate the news at the moment, because it will determine whether our species survives on the planet and whether 5 million other species survive on the planet as well. It's a unique opportunity, and I believe it's on all of us to help us grab that now and pioneering projects, some of which are represented by the people in this call, have demonstrated how we can do that. Now they need to be applied at significant scale, and that's where we need many more people to engage. And that's why it's so crucial, and particularly with this UN decade on ecological restoration starting next year, there's going to be a big focus on it, and people are going to be looking for, how do we do this? So this course, I think, is a key element in that. So I'd encourage everybody who's interested to sign up and join us.
Indeed. So to the question once again, why is this course needed now? What is it about our current society that makes us need to take a course like this? Rhamis was first.
Yeah, so actually to piggyback off of what Alan said, I mean, what he had just referred to when he said that if you look at the history of the world, you look at places like the Middle East, you know, working in Jordan or other portions of the, you know, the Arabian Peninsula, the, you know, Upper Mesopotamia, North Africa, a lot of these places were, they mark, you know, really some of the earliest human civilizations that we have access to in, you know, in recorded history. Agriculture started in the Fertile Crescent, which would be the region in and around the Levant, right? So, so there was something that has, you know, that's occurred from the time that agriculture started in this place up to now. So, for example, if you look at a place like Egypt, Egypt was the breadbasket of the Roman Empire, and if you look at Egypt now, it is the largest importer of wheat in the world. Well, sort of, I guess it's running neck and neck with you know, places like India and the like. But you have to ask yourself, what happened from the time of being the breadbasket of the Roman Empire to now being the largest importer of wheat in the world? And it has everything to do with the way that land use has changed over time. And really it's human mismanagement that has caused this to occur. But it's often happening at a rate that's very difficult for us to always be mindful of. If you look at many of the accounts of history as to what the common modes of failure are for civilizations, you'll invariably, they are tied to typically 3 modes of failure. It begins with deforestation and habitat destruction. It moves on to soil problems, which kind of appear most notably as soil erosion, salinization, and loss of fertility. And then they usually end up in water problems, because once the ground has been made dysfunctional in the manner that it is when you remove vegetation, then you are going to have difficulty with managing water properly, and then ultimately it changes climate. And unless this is understood, and this information is informing the way that we are in the world so that we can change our behavior, then it's going to be very difficult for us to actually come up with solutions that actually make sense. Mm-hmm. The solutions are not ones that are primarily found in coming up with new and novel technologies. Technology just amplifies or magnifies human behavior, whether it's good behavior or bad behavior. What we have to address is how our behavior is informed by the information which allows us to be a certain way in the world. And I think that's what is on offer with these courses, is that there are examples provided to, you know, those people who are participating. There are examples provided which gives us a vision, a look into how we can possibly be different in the world so that we can actually produce a different outcome.
Mm. Yes. I think, Dan, did you still want to say something? Because you raised your hand after Rhamis did. I think you're muted though.
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I haven't been working in ecosystem restoration as long as Alan and Rhamis have, so it's very inspiring to hear their stories. But what has really motivated me the past few years is that I met all these great people who are planting tiny forests in cities in India and Pakistan.
Can you move a bit
England.
closer to your microphone, Dan?
Yeah, sure. So I've been I haven't been working in ecosystem restoration that long, but because I started making tiny forests, I met all these wonderful people from Pakistan, from India, from Japan, from Jordan, from Belgium, England, and all other countries of the world who are doing the same thing. And it makes me feel part of a movement. And my single forest, which is useless because it's 200 square meters, dealing with the challenges ahead, isn't as useless anymore. It becomes very useful because I know all these other people worldwide are engaging in the same activities. So for me, joining this course is joining a network of people who are passionate about restoring the earth to its former glory. And hopefully, yeah, I think you'll meet like-minded people, and it will make you feel part of a movement. I believe it's important to become part of a network. This course can provide that.
Mm, agreed. Yeah, one of the things about this course that I think is really fantastic is that, say you have a piece of land or an ecosystem that's close to your heart that you walk past every day, like a stream that you always walk past, and you see that it's full of trash and there's no life in it, and every day your heart drops when you see that stream and you wish you knew how to fix it, or how to regenerate it. This course will support you in doing that. So the dream is that hundreds of people, thousands of people take the course, and then ecosystems all around the world start to revive. Thank you. I'm not sure who went first, Daniel. Oh, Oliver. It's like, who's going to go first?
No worries. So yeah, everybody made some really good points here, and especially Rhamis and Alan. I mean, you guys represent some of the inspirations that got me into this in the first place, and it's been really inspiring to watch their work since the beginning. And this is exactly why we need more people to learn these types of skills. We are at a crossroads, like Alan said, where the actions that we take now are going to determine humanity's future moving forward. It's no smaller than that. And as much as, there's some fantastic expertise represented in the instructors here, every context is different. Every ecosystem has its own nuances and things that people need to learn about. And this course offers a framework for you to learn how to interact with an ecosystem in a way that has a positive benefit, but still make your own assessments and make your own decisions that are correct for exactly where you are. Nobody can be an expert at absolutely all of these, and we need to create basically an army of earth regenerators in order to address all of the specific and very detailed and context appropriate needs that are present in all of these different places around the world. And we can only do that with informed and empowered people taking what they know and applying it to the specific issues of where they are. And the more people that we can share this information to, the faster that this body of knowledge is going to expand and increase. And I really look forward to learning from the people who will be learning from this course in years and decades in the future, who have expanded upon this knowledge and figured out incredible ways to apply it to exactly where they are.
Fantastic. And Daniel, did you want to answer this question too?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for the answer of everyone. Very, very great. And to me, this course is important to inspire people and to empower people, because anyone can really start a regeneration work everywhere in the world. So at this point, we need everyone to join us so that there's more of us, bringing that change already that we're all waiting for, so that we empower our neighbors, our kids, our friends everywhere, because, like Oliver was saying, it's needed everywhere. There's different solutions, things that we don't even know that we're going to need, that community, that network that supports, everyone in that way. Also to let people think for themselves, right? Not that everything that is out there, it's necessarily, what's going to happen, but that we can bring change together. And I think at this point, to bring these cases and these wonderful people together so they can spread these tools, for everyone in the world, so that they realize we can do things differently and we know how to. So that's why I think it's very relevant for you to take this course and join all of us to bring this change.
I'm going to be moving on to the next question in just a second, Rhamis. So is it a pressing point or?
Yeah. I think another really important part of this this whole the theme of the call. Why is this important? I think having a very clear understanding as to the size and the scale of the problem is important. So if you check a lot of the information that is currently published about specifically about the problem of land degradation and desertification, we're currently looking at something on the order of roughly about 40% of the world is characterized as being sort of arid or semi-arid. Something on the order of 75% of the soils on the planet are now in a state where they're considered to be, again, heavily degraded. We're losing approximately 10 to 12 million hectares of land a year to desertification or land degradation and desertification. It's roughly 25 to 30 million acres a year. It's approximately 33,000 hectares a day. So, and those numbers have been published, those numbers have been used for probably for the past 10 or 15 years. So we're probably looking at rates, that are actually faster than that. So understanding the severity of the problem I think is really important, because that hopefully would communicate to people the urgency of actually doing something about this sort of post haste. So I think this also is another. This explains why the classes, the courses that are on offer are also again very important.
Yeah, and ecosystem degradation and collapse affects everyone and everything, because it's where our food comes from, it's where our water comes from. The more degraded the land, the more likelihood there is for conflict. If we want to live in a world that is safe, then this is what we need to do. I'm going to move us on to the next point now. So number 2, the question is, what can people learn from this course? So I'd like us to go into a bit of detail, not too much detail, but a brief summary of what your lessons talk about, so that you can wet the whistle of the people here and it'll make them want to sign up and learn more. So should we go in reverse order this time? Who went last before? I think it was Oliver. Oliver, do you want to go first? Actually, no, you're module 5, you should go. Let's do it in the order of the way the course runs. That makes sense. So module 1, represented by Alan, can you talk about what people will learn in your lesson, which is the first lesson of the course, by the way, so it starts on the 18th of May.
Right, thanks, Ashleigh. So my course is about restoring temperate forest ecosystems, and it's really based on the experience I've had over 30 years with the Caledonian forests in Scotland. So it begins with looking at the state of the land today and how it got there, and not just the loss of the trees, but all of the ecosystem processes and functions that are missing as well. Because we all suffer from something called shifting baseline syndrome, where the world as we remember it as a child is kind of our baseline, but successive generations have had a reduced baseline for hundreds of years. So we used to have wolves in Scotland, we used to have bears and all sorts of big wildlife in this vast forest. Now there's virtually nothing except deer. So my course looks at what's happened, all the links in the ecological web of life that have been broken, the species that have gone extinct, and then it looks at what is keeping everything in that state, what is interfering with the natural recovery process. Because 10,000 years ago, there were no trees in Scotland either, because the whole country had been covered by ice. And when the climate warmed up, the forest came back, the wildlife came back, and people came back. That should be happening again now, but we're preventing it. So that's one of the key things. What is preventing the natural process? So looking at that, in Scotland's case, the main factors are far too many large herbivores, deer and sheep, which are totally out of balance. And in some areas, it's burning the heather moorland, which destroys any tree seedlings that are there. So it's looking at what simple steps can we take then to stop those processes and then accelerate it. Tree planting is not the first option. Let the forest regenerate by itself. How do we go about doing that? We relieve the browsing pressure. And then it's looking at things like more details of the ecosystem. What species need assistance to recover? There are some species which don't produce seed very often, which are very rare in Scotland now, for instance, but which are very common in related forests in Scandinavia. There's things like red squirrels, which are missing from some of our isolated woodlands in Scotland. They're too small and the squirrels have been lost historically, and they're too isolated, so they can't get back by themselves. So it's looking at what species need assistance to recover in the intervening period until we can get the forest re-established again. We also look at the role of keystone species, which are perhaps relatively few in number, but are very significant in their ecological impact. A classic one being, for instance, the European beaver, which is a keystone species in aquatic and riparian ecosystems. So my course provides some of the indicators of how you go about this, and those principles can be applied anywhere. A keystone species in a different part of the world will be something different, but if you focus on the keystone species, a lot of other things benefit. So I'll be providing some of the tools and techniques which, although they're applied here in Scotland, they can be applied everywhere.
Yeah, I'm glad you finished on that point, because we've had a fair few people interested in taking the course who, for example, want to restore a temperate or Mediterranean forest in Spain, for instance, and they're wondering whether your lesson will be relevant. And I've been telling them that all of the points that you cover are applicable to other forest ecosystems as well.
Yeah, good. And the thing I'd say is a kind of a slightly more general point, but I think it's really essential because it underpins everything I've done, is we've built this human culture today under the illusion that we're separate from nature, we're disconnected, and it doesn't matter what we do, and that underlies all of our problems. And engaging in restoration, helping nature to recover, reconnects us with the web of life, and that is crucial. And that's why it's so important to get people engaged in restoration too, to come out, to plant a tree, to clean up a river, to collect seeds, whatever it is, because it reconnects us with nature, and that is empowering. And that's one of the key things I think that will come across in my module, because almost all the work of restoring the Caledonian forest at Trees for Life has been done by volunteers. They come because they're inspired, and they come back because they see they make a difference. And that is tremendously empowering, and there's a great need for that in the world today. How can people contribute? Ecological restoration is one of the best ways of doing that, of really making a contribution to improving the state of the planet.
I completely agree, and that's the core driver and reason why we established ecosystem restoration camps, so that there are places all over the world where people can take part in the restoration of our landscapes. All right, let's move on to Module 2. Rhamis is representing Module 2. Module 2 is the restoration of agricultural ecosystems, or land that is used for agricultural uses. So take it away, Rhamis.
Yeah, so the course that I'm holding is covering some project work that is actually currently underway. But has some ties to the work of the Lawtons in Jordan over the course of about 20 years.
Can you just say who Jeff Lawton is for those?
Yes, I'm sorry. So Jeff Lawton is the managing director of the Permaculture Research Institute of Australia. He worked very closely with Bill Mollison, one of the co-founders of permaculture, for a lot of years. He actually managed Bill's old farm in Tyalgum, New South Wales, the original Permaculture Institute, probably sometime in the 90s. But he had first taken a course with Bill in the early 80s, if I remember correctly, 1983. But he's been engaged in work in Jordan for probably since 1999. His wife is Jordanian, Nadia. And so over the course of getting work happening in the region, and specifically in the Dead Sea Valley, Jordan River Valley, which is a really, it's quite a difficult environment. His project is actually set up in a region that is understood to be the lowest point on Earth, actually, which is about 400 meters below sea level. Actually, one of the sites that I'm working on, along with my colleagues, is in a place called Ghor al-Safi, which is just south of the evaporation pools of the Dead Sea. That is in the lowest place on Earth. It's somewhere between 400 and 420 meters below sea level. So if you look at climatically, where that would put you in terms of like climate analog, you'd be located somewhere in northern Saudi, basically. So it's a very arid environment. It gets quite hot in the summer. Probably get temperatures easily in the upper 40 degrees Celsius. I'm thinking probably in certain days you're probably pushing 50. You have surface temperatures that are, probably somewhere between 60 and 70 degrees Celsius. So it's a very harsh environment. You have very high evaporation. If you look at the rates of evaporation off of the Dead Sea, you're looking at somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000 millimeters, with rates of precipitation somewhere between 60 and maybe 140 or 150 millimeters in that southern portion of the Dead Sea. So it is by definition an arid environment by virtue of having more evaporation than precipitation. So sort of designing in a setting like that, it has to look a very particular way. And I think what also has to be considered is Jordan is easily one of the most water challenged countries in the world, certainly in the Middle East. So I believe the per capita allotment for countries that are considered to have severe water scarcity is 500 cubic meters per capita per year. Jordan is roughly somewhere between 145 and 155 cubic meters of water per person per year. So they have about 30% of the severe volume of water per capita. So this is, and you also have to consider that Jordan is a country that takes on very large numbers of refugees from the conflicts that are occurring in that region. So if you go back to the 40s, with the influx of people that came in from Palestine, Israel, if you go to Syria, and the people that have come in from the Syrian conflict, you go to Iraq, the people that came from the Iraqi conflict, the conflict there. And then also they have very large numbers of Egyptian migrants, many of them working in as manual laborers. So it's just it's not solely about what's happening with the landscapes and what's happening with the climate. It's also that's made more complicated by the fact that you have this extremely complex and challenging social milieu to work in the midst of. This sort of geopolitical situation that also makes things very difficult. Mm-hmm. So the work that I had a chance to participate in here is actually based on a meeting that I was able to have with the Jordan members of the Jordan Valley Water Authority and a number of farm owners back in 2015. And this was again at the behest of the Lawtons. They asked me and a colleague of mine, Salah Ahmad, to meet with them and talk about some potential solutions for some of their challenges. And a lot of what we talked about, interestingly enough, came from some work that was done in Iran after Jeff and Nadia had taught a course there a little over a decade ago. And the results that came back from some of the pilot projects that were initiated after the course were very promising. And I think they also illustrated the kinds of solutions that could be implemented in Jordan. And on the basis of that information, we were able to convince a couple of Jordanian ministries, the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Planning, along with the National Agricultural Research Center, that we should try actually setting up a couple of research and development sites and design them using sort of permaculture / regenerative agriculture / agroecology or agroecological principles. And a lot of it actually harkens back to traditional forms of agriculture that you had in that part of the world, which were really based on sort of agriculture, very diverse, multi-species agricultural oases. And really, ultimately, the goal is to, if water is the challenge in that setting, the goal is to create an arrangement that allows for you to be able to minimize evaporation, to maximize the efficiency and the effectiveness of water use, and really try to create as, again, diverse and as broad a set of not only productive possibilities within an agricultural context, but improve the ecological functioning of the arrangement as well. So this is basically what I'll be talking about in my 4 sessions for my module.
Mm-hmm. And would you say that people who are interested in regenerative agriculture and agroecology and food forestry, who are working in contexts that are slightly less difficult than Jordan, could still learn some key techniques from what you teach? Absolutely.
I mean, basically the project that is happening in Jordan, if you can do it there, you can do it anywhere. I mean, if you can do it in a place that only gets, between 50, 100 and 150 millimeters of rain a year, with temperatures and evaporation rates as high as you have in that part of the world, then you can apply the same principles, with appropriate, adjustments adjustments anywhere, and get, even better results. And again, it's just, understanding that the sort of the functional patterns, as far as the design cues that you want to keep in mind in putting in some of these solutions into use, they really don't change. There still is an emphasis put on, again, trying to retain as much water as possible, really focusing on the quality and the condition of soils, the structuring of soils, addressing problems like compaction, looking at markers like the pH of soils, organic matter content, biology, all of those things. That's the base. And if you can take care of those things, then everything else that is dependent on those things being in good order, it's almost a no-brainer, right? It's just being very mindful of and being aware of those factors, and that's what will allow you to meet with success.
Yeah, the reason that I'm asking these questions is because some of the people that have been emailing showing an interest in the course have maybe thought that because the course has a really broad, diverse range of lessons about different topics from different places, and each one is an hour long, that it's going to be too broad and not deep enough. But they all build on one another, because what Rhamis is teaching is also, what Alan is teaching is also relevant to your context, and taking key learnings from each lesson will help you build an overall picture, an idea of what you need to do to restore the ecosystem that you have in mind.
Yeah, and just to follow that that point you made, say that Alan working in a temperate context, me working in an arid and semi-arid context, and say someone who is working in the tropics, we're all still looking at, we all still have to account for, again, species selection, having an understanding as to, again, the functioning of the different species that are found in each climate. You're still, again, having really paying close attention to soils, and you're trying to be mindful of water and how to manage water. Each of the climatic contexts are going to call for you to maybe emphasize certain things, but you still have to really pay attention to those building blocks, and you'll see how they adjust, again, in each context, in each setting, how the context demands that you put an emphasis on different things, within those settings. But those are the building blocks. And as long as you have an understanding of those basic building blocks and you're able to apply them appropriately in those contexts, then you should be fine. So it's you know, like the permaculture principle of working from patterns to details. So a lot of what we'll be talking about are the patterns of the context. And then the details would be identifying things like specific species. You know, those and then more specific strategies. But understanding the pattern of the context is that's really the thing that's emphasized.
Yeah. And each one of your projects has been really successful, and that's why you're part of this course. And there are keys to success that are replicable across all contexts.
Absolutely.
Okay, so moving on to module 3, which is restoring urban ecosystems and land in urban areas. We've got both Dan and Daniel with us today. Dan's lesson focuses on building tiny forests in cities. So let's go to Dan now. Dan, can you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, sure. I'll share my screen. I've prepared a little cartoon to show you what we...
Unfortunately, your sound quality is quite poor, Dan.
Is it really?
Yeah, you're breaking up. We can see your screen well, though.
Right. Well, that's a good thing. And let me try and fix the audio. Is it getting better now?
It's quite crackly and coming in and out.
Let me try it this way. Is this better or worse?
Slightly. Yeah, I think it's good enough.
All right. Yeah. Hopefully you guys can hear me. So, what are we teaching? So this is basically, I'm from the Netherlands, which is probably the third most densely populated country in the world. People have called it a thinly populated city. What are we going into is what are the main reasons? In part one, we'll talk about the causes of degradation. You can actually see this is a map of Holland. So we used to live in this green, lush paradise. And then Joni Mitchell sang in the 70s, we paved our paradise, put up a parking spot. It actually applies. So we have a lot of hard surfaces, a lot of stone in our cities. So in the second part of the course, I'll show you how to actually, if something is a parking lot, if something is a road, if something is covered in asphalt, you can actually restore the potential natural vegetation that used to grow there. So in part two, we'll look at the concept of potential natural vegetation. So which plants will you use? You'll learn how to do a survey in a natural forest to really select a species that will thrive at your location. We'll look at the soil. So what are we dealing with? Are we planting on clay? Are we planting on sand soils? Are we planting on peat or loam? And what does that mean for a soil preparation? Because the soil in cities is heavily degraded. Everything has been cultivated, so nothing of the original content of soil remains. So we'll look at the soil. We'll look at how to reboot the soil, how to breathe life back into it. Select your species, and how to, especially the first couple of years, 2 or 3 years, to maintain it. And after that, you will have a self-renewing ecosystem that will thrive and will be very biodiverse. Well, in part 3, we'll talk about the challenges you will face. It won't be that much about the technique because we'll handle that in part 2. But it's especially in urban context, it will be very hard procuring land because some patches of land have 3 landowners. How do you deal with that? You have a local community. You have something to say about the patch of land. You have. We always want to involve school kids. I'll talk a little about that. You have all the underground infrastructure that you can't see in cities. So how do you deal with all those cables and pipes running through? So we'll deal with things like that, and we'll deal a lot with how to get your funding, how to convince stakeholders, how to convince landowners, how to engage people once the forest is there with agro classrooms, with citizen scientists. So we'll look at that, and in part 4, I'll share the key lessons we have learned in 80 projects of restoring tiny forests in cities. Those are the key lessons that I think everybody can learn from and can apply in their context. If you want to do an ecosystem restoration project in the city, yeah, I think these lessons will really help you to prepare for them, and you'll be able to apply them. So this is basically the course design made out of 4 parts. So hopefully I'll see you there and hope to engage with you guys.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, a lot of the people who, Rhamis probably knows this because he's good at the stats. Do you know how many people, what the percentages of people that live in cities in comparison to rural areas now?
Okay.
He knows. Let's just ask Dan.
Okay, no, Dan, go. No, Dan.
Sorry, Dan. What's the percentage of people that live in cities these days?
Well, in 2016, we had hit the point where more people live in cities than in rural areas. So right about now, it's 60%. In Holland, it's already close to 70%, and it's expected to rise in the following 10 years to 75%.
Yeah. So seeing as the majority of people live in cities, and there seems to be a correlation between urban city dwellers and people who are concerned about climate change, there is a clear need for lessons like this.
And actually, just to back up what Dan said, I think according to the UN that they're expecting by 2050, 2/3 of the planet will be in cities. Roughly, the projected population is 9.2 billion by 2050. So 2/3 of 9.2 billion people are expected to live in cities by mid-century.
Yeah. I would like to go to Daniel now, but it seems like he's dropped off the call. Maybe he's had issues with his internet. So hopefully he will come back in a moment. We can go to him. But in the meantime, I'll talk about module 4, which is the business models module. And the reason why this module is important is because relying on charity to fund your restoration project is risky, difficult, and hard to predict, because charity interests or interests of trusts and foundations and wealthy philanthropists tend to trend from one topic to another over time. And so even though now ecosystem restoration is quite a popular topic and something that's in the forefront of a lot of funders' minds, in the future it could be something different. For example, the coronavirus has arrived and funders may want to fund that issue instead. So it's safer for you to develop a business that can fund the not only fund your restoration work, but a business that in its very essence is regenerative, in that it, rather than taking and depleting resources, it restores and regenerates them as the business goes on. And that is something that we will be looking at in module 4. So the first lesson is with Simon Moulinar from Common Land, and he is a Daniel's WhatsApping me saying he's trying to get back in. Ben, can you let Daniel in? A little bit of backstage for you. As I was saying, yeah, module 4 looks at business models, and Common Land is spearheading a new type of economy and investment that's based on 4 returns. So the return of, you invest money into restoring a landscape, and then you have not just a financial return, but you have a return of natural capital, you have a return of inspiration, and they're pioneering a new type of economics. So you'll learn from him about that. And he also goes through something called a business model canvas, which is like a template for how you can map out a business idea that you have. And what we'll be looking at in module 5 is how you can put your business idea into that canvas and use it as a way to restore your ecosystem. There are also 2 other ecosystem restoration businesses that have their own lessons. One is a regenerative poultry company, a company that is returning the chicken to the forest, as chicken was originally a forest animal. And Old Tree, which is a drinks company that creates living drinks for living soil. And they're both really excellent examples of regenerative ecosystem restoration companies. So you'll be learning from them. And then the last lesson in that module is by yours truly, and we'll be talking about ecosystem restoration camps and how we're funded, how we work as a charity. So it'll talk about ways that you can raise money in a charity, in a non-profit way, if that's what you're interested in, and then looking at the business models that our camps use if you're perhaps interested in turning your restoration project into a camp at some point in the future. So that's module 4, but now that Daniel's here, let's go, sorry, yeah, getting confused between Dan and Daniel. Now Daniel's here, let's go back to talking about his lesson, which is on restorative buildings.
Thank you, Ash. I'm sorry for that.
Okay.
So I'm going to be talking about the problematic of ecosystem degradation here in our area, so you can identify some indicators about it. But also we're going to focus on how developments in this region have been part of that destruction in the ecosystems. So we're going to focus on how to change that core model of developments for being destructive into being more regenerative.
When you say development, you mean housing development, don't you? Just to be clear.
Yes, I mean housing developments in this case, but it can be applied to any kind of building, really. Because if we're gonna design a building, we're planning one, we first have to really study, you know, and be in coherence with its environment first. We have to really understand what topography is letting us know, so that we are actually respectful and that we can, you know, to design in a way that is going to enhance that ecosystem. So we're gonna go how to use commercial investments, certain models, you know, to bring change, because here in San Miguel, there's a lot of real estate and people, you know, like to buy properties. And just because of this, the expansion and the growth, you know, of concrete, it's tremendous. So if that's energy is here in this region, that investment is here, we're showing you how to use that, you know, into making regenerative developments for housing, for any kind of building, really. So the basis of how to design a building that is capable of, you know, sustain its own water, its own energy, to provide organic food, and how to use the water and filter it to give it back to nature, so that you can keep humidity year round in that area. So we're going to go from selection of natural materials, local materials, to build a house, to create natural insulation, from innovative appliances like super saving showers and faucets, so that, you know, we can take care of that precious resource, which is water. So to even be regenerative, we need to first design a building for it to be able to sustain itself. So everything about cross ventilation, passive insulation, natural materials, living walls, so that you don't have to have any air conditioning, you know, or this kind of things that disrupt the climate here. We're going to show a little bit into that, and also the design process from which we designed our village. So we're going to show a little bit of water retention landscapes. We're going to show a little bit of planning infrastructure, so that you don't disrupt the water flows and these things, how to reduce the amount of infrastructure, and some models, you know, that you can design and build your communities in this way. So it's about reading the site, and hopefully to inspire you, so that you are able to design this way and build this way, so that new buildings, you know, in this area can actually help us, that everything that we do in our house, from brushing our teeth, having a shower, going to the toilet, all of those activities are naturally and automatically helping us restore the balance and giving nutrients to our soils. So it's a part of integrating the development, since we probably cannot fight against it, we cannot stop it. So we're setting out a model how to work with it, so that we can bring this new spaces and buildings that can gather people together, and to creating communities, but also, you know, so that these buildings and this development is not disrupting and helping with the desertification on the local areas, so that we can plan better buildings for the future. That's a little bit of what we're going to show you in this module.
Amazing. Thanks, Daniel. I want to take the course. Sign me up. Sounds great. So last but not least, let's talk to Oliver, who is the facilitator and teacher for Module 5. And yeah, take it away, Oliver. Tell us what Module 5 is all about.
Sure. So in Module 5, since it's at the end, we'll kind of guide you through all of the steps to create your own restoration design for anywhere that you are in the world, something that is specific to your place. And through 4 sections, we'll go through gathering essential information from your land. And this will go over things like templates for creating plant databases, resources that you can find either online or in local government areas to help create base maps, things like analyzing the topography of your space, doing soil samples, basically all of the essential information to understand the level of degradation that it's at, the causes of that degradation, and the specifics of your site that you need to start making informed decisions to repair the damage. From there, we'll go on to defining visions and goals. And once you have a clear definition of exactly what it is you're trying to get to, you can start to reverse engineer your steps back all the way to getting out of this like sense of overwhelm. Oh man, it can be such a big idea to regenerate or restore an ecosystem entirely. But when you break it down into manageable pieces, it can be much, much more empowering to be able to take steps forward. From there, we'll work through the scale of permanence, which was designed by P.A. Yeomans back around in the 50s in Australia, who pioneered this idea of analyzing ecosystem influences by those which you have really no effect over, things like climate, and working all the way to the ones that you have the most effect over and that are easiest to influence, and things like soils. And by working in this order, you can prioritize the steps that you need to take to have the biggest impact and the most lasting impact on your site. From there, we'll be working on building the layers of design. And of course, this is going to be different for everybody's context. And so I'll walk you through the process that I've used professionally for clients, and even in some of my own projects that I've been a part of for the last handful of years and in different places around the world, to break things down into categories and design by analyzing, let's say, where you're going to be putting your plants, how you're going to be directing, storing, sinking, and saving water from the landscape, and all of the other things that are relevant to your context. And so through those 4 sections, we're going to build up to actually creating a final presentation, which can then be put into a condensed version for your design. We'll be working through a process of peer review, and then later a review by myself and the other facilitators on the course, so that you get a lot of feedback. We have a chance to ask more questions and analyze some of your decision making. And we'll also be putting out recorded Q&A sessions that help you work through any challenges or sticking points that you might have after putting all of this information together. And you'll also have the opportunity to work in teams, which I think is really important, because almost nobody is going to be implementing a restoration design on their own. Even if you come up with the design, even if you do all the information gathering yourself, it's really important to learn how to work with other people and assess sort of the assets that you're bringing, but also work with what other people in the group are bringing as well, for a cohesion, for a synergy that helps everyone to work well together and have important impact and move in the right direction on your project. So that's mostly what Module 5 is going to be working towards.
Cool, thank you. And you'll also be encouraged to fill out a business model canvas template for a business idea that you can implement to make your restoration plan happen. So we have one final question, which is, what will people be able to do once they've taken this course? I'd like us to just talk about this for 5 minutes, because then we'll be handing it over to the audience for their own questions. Does anyone have something short that they want to say to answer the question, what will people be able to do once they've taken this course? We've already mentioned it a little bit. Yes, Dan?
I can just show 2 pictures of what they'll be able to do. So
Okay, just speak louder than words.
All right. Yeah. So, yeah, my sound doesn't work. So I have to use pictures, which I like to do. Let's see. So here you see a parking lot, and in this course, after this course, you will be able to turn this typical urban landscape into a lush green forest. And this is just 10 months later, and it will look like this. So this is what I will be teaching you in module 3.
Amazing. Well, that's a very concrete example of what you'll be able to do. I think I could answer this question, seeing as I was the main designer of this course and putting this course together. And so my vision of what you'll be able to do when you leave is maybe most clear in my head. So like I've mentioned before, what you should be able to do by the end of this course is to create a restoration plan and a business plan for an ecosystem that you love, because places that you love that love gives you the driving force to want to restore it. If it's somewhere that you go to and visit often, having it restored will mean that you can enjoy it more. And like I said, if each student or a team of students create a restoration plan and a business plan, and they feel empowered and able, knowledgeable to be able to put the restoration plan and the business plan into action, then that will result in restored ecosystems all over the world. So that was what I dreamt of when putting this course together. And what you've seen from this Q&A, and these are just some of the teachers on the course, there are actually 18 teachers in total. Each one will be teaching you about a project that they've done themselves. So you'll learn directly from experienced people as to what they did, what went wrong for them, and what they have done to resolve those problems. You're learning from other people's learnings, which will put you in a very powerful position to be able to become an ecosystem restoration designer and practitioner yourself. So without further ado, let's go to the questions. If you have any questions for us, please write them in the chat box, and our colleague Ben is writing them to me now. So I'll start by asking some of the ones that have already come in. Okay, number 1. Are land use opportunity costs and ecological efficiency, in brackets 10% law, considered in this course? Is anyone familiar with those concepts? Because I am not. Land use opportunity costs. Does that mean, can you clarify what that means, the person who wrote that question? Is there anyone here that's familiar with that term?
You talking about like the economic concept of the opportunity cost and applying it to landscapes?
I imagine that's what is meant. Maybe we can come back to that one if that person can clarify what they mean. Oh, Rhamis? You're muted.
Sorry. Well, I'm not entirely clear about what they're referring to with the 10% law, but there are figures that have been provided that illustrate the types of losses that are tied to the phenomenon of land degradation and desertification. So there's a report that was published by an outfit called the United Nations University that says they estimate that the value of ecosystem services worldwide forfeited due to land degradation is estimated to be somewhere between 6.3 trillion and 10.6 trillion annually, which is roughly somewhere between 10 and 20% of global GDP. If you look at some of the other figures here, effectively addressing land degradation could help avert humanitarian crises that here the humanitarian crisis in the form of forced migrations, which are, upwards of 50 to 60 million people peoples whose livelihoods are disrupted due to not having access to viable land. And there's another figure that actually says, I think somewhere, here it is. If the current pace of land degradation continues unabated, this is from the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, a gargantuan amount of $43 trillion will be lost to the world economy by the year 2050. So, this gives you some idea as to the sort of the magnitude of the problem in dollar and cent terms. But it's hard to quantify that monetarily because there are all of these other, I think, effects, these like compound impacts that I think is very hard to kind of model that and quantify that solidly in dollar terms.
Yes, Alan?
Yeah, I don't have anything sort of specific about the details of that question, but it raises a bigger issue for me, which I think is really fundamental to what we're all about here. Our present day society treats ecology as a minor subset to be addressed in terms of the economy. And in fact, that's the wrong way of looking at things. The economy is a subset of the ecology. Mm. If we don't have a healthy ecology, if we don't have healthy ecosystems, there will be no economy. So I would encourage whoever asked that question to think about turning it on its head, because our present economy is a house of cards which is tottering at the moment. It's about to fall. And we see that with all the national debts. And that debt, the original debt, is the debt of damaged and destroyed ecosystems. And we have to put that back. And once we've done that, we can then have a sustainable economy. And if you look at permaculture, if you look at ecological restoration, it's all about reintegrating humans into nature rather than trying to fit nature into an economic model. That's what has to change.
Thank you, Alan. Okay, the second question is, for Rhamis, human behavior change, is human restoration part of the ERC camp concept and teachings? That seems to be a general question about the ERC rather than the course.
Yeah, I think that goes beyond the the purview of the course. Yeah. That is ultimately the problem, is like, how do you address problematic human behavior? And I think we have to that goes beyond simply talking about sort of technique, because a lot of what we're talking about is technique and strategy. Then when you start talking about how do you address the qualities in the human species that cause them to behave in certain ways that have shown themselves to be problematic, we don't cover that. That's another skill set and kind of collection of expertise. But I think what a lot of what we'll talk about certainly highlights the symptoms and the clues and the cues, which which shows that there's certain things about how we go about operating in the world that really needs to change, and that there is an enlightened self-interest in prioritizing that. So there's a great Masanobu Fukuoka quote. I remember getting this from one of the last books he published. I think it was called "Sowing Seeds in the Desert." And he says that about the human beings. He says, and kind of modern contemporary civilization. He said that we are the octopus congratulating itself for becoming fat by eating its own legs. So the conversation has to turn to how do we stop being satisfied by getting fat from eating our own legs. And I don't think we covered that in the course work.
I don't remember that. Alan does talk quite a lot, though, about how restoration, like you were saying earlier, how restoration is really empowering, and one of the key elements that reconnects humans with the rest of the more than human world. And that's also something that Dan's mentioned with the work of inner city children, and being able to create your own tiny forest like galvanizes the connection to nature. So it is a part of what the camps do, and it is mentioned in the course by other teachers, but it's not one of the core topics, but it is mentioned in other lessons. I'm going to move on because we're running out of time. The next question is, I'm also curious about whether I would need any previous experience or engagements with working with land, planning / restoration. No, is the answer. What we've tried to do is, if there are any topics that are covered in the lessons that would be unfamiliar to someone who's completely new to this, is that we have a additional learning materials section of each lesson which breaks down each topic and subject. And you're also encouraged, if you come across a term that's unfamiliar, like climate analogues, for example, it's very easy to look up what that means. So it's your own responsibility to make sure that you chase up anything that is unclear to you. But the course was designed for people who don't have experience with this sort of thing before. Does anyone else want to add anything to that?
I will. I'll just say, I think many of us engaged in the work of restoration had no prior experience. I certainly didn't. I had no training in forests, biology, ecology, or anything. The most crucial thing from my perspective is to have a love of land, a love of nature. And all those other things, as you say, can be found from resources online, from books, from talking with other people. But I think the crucial thing is to have an active interest and a passion and a willingness to do something and to learn. And it'll all fall into place from that. Yeah,
you're motivated by your love of the world and not wanting it to die, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's go on to the next question. How would you say this course addresses the trade-offs of restoration when the climate may make that impractical? What does it mean to restore when the future is so precarious? Rhamis, and then Oliver.
Yeah, I think this idea that somehow these are mutually exclusive phenomena is unfounded. I mean, the idea that somehow climate is not connected to the condition of land is false. Climate is intimately connected to the condition of land, and the reason why climate changes is because land use has changed. The condition of land has changed. So, you know, I think I've mentioned it in my course, but one of the people I had a chance to come into contact with and talk about some of these things is a Spanish climatologist named Professor Milan. And, you know, he's been collecting climate data specifically in the western portion of the Mediterranean basin for like 50 years. And he shows like definitively how the weather in the Mediterranean has changed in correspondence to the changes in land use. If you look at a place like even the Middle East, you know, we just talked about, this was the Fertile Crescent. The Arabian Peninsula, in terms of geological time, was green like yesterday. And because it's, you know, the way that land had been used, and also in places like North Africa, it's just sort of tipped it over the edge from being maybe on the cusp of being sort of brittle and dry, and it's now fully pushed it into being brittle and dry. And it has everything to do with, again, changes in localized temperature and pressure, because you no longer have trees, you know, the compression and the expansion of, you know, airstreams and how that affects the concentration of moisture in the atmosphere, the changes in albedo, like all of these things influence climate dynamics. So this conversation that takes place between the ground and the atmosphere has been completely disrupted because the things on the ground that should be there are no longer there. So this is something that hopefully, in listening to what everybody here has to offer in the coursework, this will be firmly established and very clearly understood. So it's not an either or proposition. These are not mutually exclusive topics. Like climate is dependent on what happens in landscape.
Mm. Yeah, and also the more healthy, the healthier the ecosystem is, the more ecosystem function there is in a place, the more resilient it's going to be in the face of climate shocks like floods and storms and droughts and heat waves and that sort of thing. So the more land we restore now, the better chance we have of withstanding climate chaos in the future. Oliver, did you want to answer that question as well?
Yeah, well, so part of what I was going to say is exactly what Rhamis already touched on, is that these are not mutually exclusive things. They are they're very integral. And I think the other part of that question was addressing like the inconvenience of doing this now and how it can be, did I understand that right? Can you repeat that part?
The question, how would you say this course addresses the trade-offs of restoration when the climate may make that impractical? What does it mean to restore?
Yeah, impractical.
So precarious.
Right. So if it seems impractical now, it's partly because we haven't been doing this earlier, and it's going to be a whole lot less practical in the future if we continue to wait. So if that's a reason to not get going now, it's going to be a much bigger hurdle to try and overcome later. The sooner that we get started on this, the sooner we can start to move the needle on the conditions that are going to make it easier, that are going to make it more practical. And the longer that we wait, the inverse is also going to be true. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, next question. As well as starting a business, will the course equip us with knowledge and skills applicable for jobs? If so, what are they? I'm thinking of retraining in a new industry due to COVID-19. Anyone want to answer that? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I remember one of the last things I said to Jeff when I left this farm in 2009 was, I said, we're going to start an industry. And again, the industry had to do, I mean, there are already people that are doing ecosystem restoration. I mean, if you look up, there's a Society for Ecological Restoration. You can find, there are groups that have been doing this. But in terms of, is there an interest in basically creating an economic engine that is built on, there really isn't yet. I mean, not in the same way that you have an industry that has sprung up, around renewable energy, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that many of the renewable technologies and the quote unquote green technologies are tied to some kind of exclusive proprietary technology or intellectual property rights. And that really the way that a lot of people make money in that field is through the licensing of technology. I think ecological restoration doesn't necessarily have the same attraction in that manner, because I mean, maybe there might be an opportunity for people to create land care tools that most of the best solutions they already exist. It's just a matter of, okay, how are these things employed? And is there an interest in investing the kind of capital that would allow for the mass recovery of all of these degraded areas? And given, what we had quoted before about the size and scale of the problem, 10 to 12 million hectares of land a year, 25 to 30 million acres, we need everybody we can get. And we need really every bit of, investment capital and people that are, can imagine or think of ways to incentivize that kind of activity. We need all of that. And as many people as much as possible to, become involved in this, because again, there's an enlightened self-interest in doing so.
Yeah. Alan?
Yeah, two things I would say. One is, I think for many of us who've engaged in ecological restoration, it's a labor of love. It's something that we do not to earn money, although sometimes it is possible to earn money, but it's something that we do for personal fulfillment, which is actually a whole different way of looking at work. It's a whole different concept. And that to me is one of the things that has to change, because so many people in the world today work for something they don't believe in because it pays the bills. And this is working for something that hopefully we do believe in. But the second point is that, as has been indicated, particularly by all the facts and figures that Rhamis has come out with, there is huge need for this on the planet. There's tremendous need for it. And it's now being demonstrated, you know, that forest restoration in upland areas reduces the risks of flooding downstream, for instance, amongst many other things. And I think there's going to be a real wake-up call where communities and municipalities are going to be saying, we need to restore the area around us. And they're going to be looking for who can do that. So I think people who take this course will be getting a set of skills they can, if they're really up to it, they can then set themselves up, you know, set up their own company or set themselves up as a consultant to offer their services, which there's going to be a huge demand for in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say the same. I think at the moment, it's not as easy as just going on a job website and typing in ecosystem restoration designer, and then there's a job you can apply for with a company. It doesn't quite work like that at the moment, but you have to be quite entrepreneurial at the beginning. I mean, most of the people here have started their own companies. I've been involved in the ERC since its inception, and there's so much that needs to be done, and there is a huge demand, especially for food that's grown in a regenerative way. So the reason that this course teaches you how to create a business model canvas for a business idea is that you need to be quite entrepreneurial with how you think, because there are loads of opportunities, but there aren't just companies waiting to hire people as such. That could change in the future though. Okay, moving on. This is for you, Daniel. Do you experience a discrepancy between building in harmony with nature and architectural local codes? Do you want me to repeat that? Do you experience a discrepancy between building in harmony with nature and architectural local codes, so laws around what you can build? Is there a difference between your designs and what you're allowed to build where you are? Can you hear me? Daniel? Seems like the connection is funny.
Yeah, I'm hearing you, but it looks like Daniel's not hearing anything.
No. Daniel! All right. Can someone type? I'll type that question to him. Do you experience a Ben, can you do it? Type the question to Daniel, and we'll come back to it. So my question would be, who is coordinating the content of the different modules so that they go in depth instead of repeating things which apply in different settings covered in the different modules? So there's a team of about 6 people who are all have helped to put this course together and will then be the facilitators throughout the course. And we are all quality checking all of the lessons. We've watched them all. There's 69 videos in total, so it's quite an in-depth process. But seeing as each part of each lesson is 10 to 20 minutes, the lessons themselves aren't that long. And what has happened is that each teacher has discussed and pulled out elements of their projects that can be replicated across all of the different biomes and ecosystem types across the world, but no 2 lessons are that repetitive. So there's no need to worry about that. Okay, unfortunately, Daniel's got quite a bad connection and can't hear what we're saying. So if Ben can type that question to him, then we can get that question to him. I actually think that might be the end of the questions. There's a question here that says, will there be any information on how to set up land trusts for camps? No, is the answer. We don't have any land trusts that we're working with at the moment that are camps, but I'm still in the process of finishing off my lesson because it doesn't happen until August. So if you'd like me to cover that topic, then I can speak to that. Ben has sent the question to Daniel. Is there anyone else here that has an experience of setting up a land trust or knows how it works that could answer that question? Oliver?
I could at least take a shot at it because I've built natural buildings and designed houses mostly with natural materials around different parts of the world. And the answer is you have to check for yourself. The architectural codes and building permits that you're going to need are going to be very specific to your area. Even in places like the United States, where they can be very strict or very loose, vary by county, by sometimes even just municipalities. And so you're going to have to do that research for yourself if you're looking to build naturally. I've built in places with really strict regulations where you really have to go along with inspectors every single step of the way. And we had to adapt our plans because certain parts of what we wanted to do were simply considered illegal in those areas that just they hadn't caught up to some of the natural building techniques. And I've also built in areas where you pay for a permit to build, and it's as simple as that. And within that permit, you can build pretty much anything you want as long as you specify the size of the building. So if you are trying to build something with natural materials that is not currently allowed where you are, there are a lot of ways that you can work directly with permitting bodies, coders, regulators, in a kind of usually a pretty long process. And kind of have them give you guidance, but you also offering alternatives and options as you go along. And I've known successful architects and natural builders who have gotten a lot of new things approved through that method, but it's going to be very specific to where you happen to be.
Thank you, Oliver. So to the question about land trusts, no one here has ever worked with setting one up. So I would advise that you just do your own research on that. And we've come to the end of the session. So thank you so much to everyone who is watching and listening. I hope that this has been informative for you and has helped you to make a decision about whether or not this is the course for you. I'd like to say thank you so much to all of the people who came to do this call with me today. I feel very warm and fuzzy inside to be part of such an incredible community of people. And let's grow our community to make it very large indeed, so that we can get to work with restoring the landscapes that we need to restore to have a safe and abundant future for everyone and everything on Earth. Thank you so much. My email address is Ashleigh, ASHLEIGH, @ecosystemrestorationcamps.org. If you have any questions about the course, please feel free to email me. And hopefully we'll see some more of you signing up, and those who have already signed up. We look forward to seeing you on the 18th of May. So have a wonderful evening, morning, whatever time it is for you there. And hopefully we'll meet again somewhere someday. Bye-bye.